We're live now.
Yes, we are.
Excellent. All right. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome once again to this fortnight's BICSI South Pacific update. I'm Travis Goody, the ACT BICSI coordinator. Right, thank you once again for joining us, and thank you very much to Fluke for the use of their WebEx platform today as well. And just a little bit of general housekeeping just before we get going there. So just any questions and comments for this webinar, could you please type them into the moderator via the chat box for us? Right, we will have a question and answer time allocated at the end of the webinar as well, so please feel free to come up with anything you'd like to ask. And also, just for anyone with the continuing education credits, right, you'll be able to obtain those at the end of this event also. Right, so just a little bit on the agenda. All right, there's just a few items that we'll be going through beforehand before we hand over to Peter Greaves from Aurecon, right, where he's doing his presentation on buildings of the future, then the question and answer section, and then we'll be closing out the event. And just for all the members as well, we will be recording this event, and it'll be available later on. Right, so just you'll see where we're currently up to with our online webinar series. Had some great presentations that have come beforehand. Right, today's one on building the future, and then going all the way through to the end of June, and then possibly onwards and beyond. But thank you once again to our sponsors, Fluke Networks and R&M. Just a reminder as well, the BICSI South Pacific board nominees, and also nominations for the BICSI Global Director position, which closed yesterday. Right, and please, everybody, make sure you take the time to go through and enjoy the access to some of the free online courses that BICSI have put out. Some fantastic content through there, and stuff that I hope that we're all making a lot of use of. Right, just in regards to the conferences, as you may have heard before in previous presentations, so the BICSI New Zealand conference deferred to the May 2021, BICSI Australian conference deferred to Q4 in 2021, held in Sydney, and the BICSI US Fall hybrid conference that can't be attended in person or virtually at current. All right, but please keep checking in week to week and also on the BICSI website just for any of those further future updates we may have for those events. All right, and with that, I believe we're ready to kick over to Peter Greaves for him to start his presentation.
Thank you, Travis. Hopefully you can all see my screen. Can I just check that?
Yes, coming through, Peter.
Great, thank you. Okay, hello to everybody on the call. Thanks for inviting me across today, BICSI. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm sorry I can't meet you all face to face, but I assume there's a positive side to that we also have some additional people that we may not have spoken to if we were doing a face to face. So thank you for inviting me, and thank you for all of you attended. So I'm going to give an overview around what Aurecon has been doing in buildings of the future, and what predominantly our client base has been talking to us about, and the journey that we've been on, and how it. And I've tried to do the second part of the presentation that probably drives more into where you, as people that are designing technology systems, how it affects you, and some of the things that we've seen. So I'm going to go on a bit of a journey, something to do with what we've done, but also how I see it becoming a bigger part in the wider industry. So we started thinking about buildings of the future back in about 2016, and probably because everybody kept talking, just as they probably talked to all of you, around smart buildings and intelligent buildings. So we stopped and had to think about what that meant. And we had our own view of what we thought a building of the future, an intelligent building, might be. And we had four key areas we thought what it would be. And we thought it was around people at the centre, technology that was simplistic, energy at the right time and the right place, and then automation and robotics and new materials. That's what we thought it was. But we decided it doesn't really matter what we think as an industry or as a company. We probably really need to check what our users and everybody that we work for thinks about what they are. So we went off and we carried out a survey with about 200 of our key clients. And some of them are on there on that slide now. Maybe some of you are on this call today might be from some of those organisations. And we went around and carried out this survey, but we did it from very different levels. We did it from facilities management levels. We did it at the C-suite level. We did it with some architects. We also did it with people that are in operations and also the users of some of those facilities as well. And we took that information that we got from that survey and we can probably instill it down into 4 key areas. I'm going to go through what those 4 key areas are in a moment. I suppose the one thing that we would say is we carried out this research across Australia, New Zealand, most of Southeast Asia and Africa. So it's quite a broad set of research, which we found quite useful. So the first key theme area that came out of our research was that user behaviour and understanding and empowerment. Quite often in our industry, and I think I was definitely guilty of this in my earlier part of my career, I just thought a smart building was going to be a building that was full of technology, and a smart building was driven by the engineering and driven by the technology. And people don't really want that. They don't want a spaceship. They actually want a building that's simple to use and easy to use. And that was really key that came out of the research. Some of the things that drive that are up on that slide there. The war for talent. Lots of the companies that we work as a group are always trying to get the right people into their organisations and retain them. And part of the building of the future is one that those people want to be in, whether it's the technology they use at home so they can be there, like we're all using now, or is it the technology that's in the building or the actual well-being of that building? That came out a lot, the war on talent, especially obviously from building owners and the C-suite of their businesses. And they want their buildings to be frictionless is a word that kept coming up a lot from a technology perspective, particularly no barriers around technology. And I think one of the simplest things that you can ever think about how technology can cause a barrier in the building is if you look at any high-rise building that's been designed in the last 20 or 30 years, they used to have the big central core stairs. And if you were a tenant on 5 or 6 floors, the only way you could get up and down that building was normally up through the lifts, and you'd have to have a swipe card that would take you in and out of every floor. So what you were doing was putting lots of elements of friction to get in and out. So you weren't meeting people. I've definitely been involved in that situation where I might be working on floor 10 and there could be another 5 floors. I only see the people on my floor. So one of the ways designers have got that out over the last few years is by putting lots of internal stairs into buildings as much as possible. So if you think that's very simple, but it's about making it user focused. And I suppose another area that came up there as well is greener futures and minimising environmental impact, where technology plays a part in that. And if you think about smart virtual grids and how technology can be used for that and how you can use technologies to manage energy usage. So there's another area there. So the second area was efficiency and return on investment. Pretty key one, this one, as far as I'm concerned. I think this is has been the bigger blocker in doing buildings of the future. What I've noticed in the last couple of years, that block has become less because people understand that there's more to buildings of the future than OPEX and CAPEX. I think the conversation and the drivers behind business has changed, and I call it the third dimension in return on investment. And that's where you're talking about the environmental impact of your building is one area. The other one is how your building makes your users feel, their wellness, their happiness factor. And one of the probably the most important ones, I've already talked about it earlier, was the war on talent. It attracts people to come and work for you. So there is lots of discussions now on other things other than OPEX and CAPEX. They're still very important subjects, but there are other areas. The third area was the need for flexibility of design and adaptation. So if you think about how buildings are designed and how they can change quickly, at the moment, probably a little bit slow. And I think a really good example of this is the Apple HQ in America. It was probably finished about 12 months ago now. And Sir Norman Foster was the lead architect on that. And after he'd finished this great building for Apple, somebody asked him, what is the regret and what would he change? And it's not often you hear Sir Norman Foster say he changed something, but he said, yeah, we've definitely got something wrong, and we can't adapt the building quick enough. And his example he gave was they designed that building with a huge cavernous underground car park. And he said, there's no way that we're going to use cars like that in the future, and we shouldn't have allowed that car park to be that big. So he wishes that he'd been able to design that building, that car park could be repurposed into other areas. So that's where industrialised construction and mass customisation, I think, is starting to make a entry into buildings of the future. And there are some amazing companies that are doing some really good things out there. One of them I'd say to look at is a company called Katera. Making everything off in factories and then bringing everything to site and assembling kit parts. Also, new materials. I think if you think about solar and Perscovites and how they're integrating into buildings now, if you think about 5 years ago or 10 years ago, how expensive solar was, and then 5 years ago, solar became normal on buildings, and every project we do probably has solar. And now Perscovites mean that we can actually start integrating it into the building facade, and how projects we're working on now have microgrids in and it's a common practice. And if you think 2 years ago, it wasn't. So it's common for this point in time. So the fourth and final area that came out in the research was advances in technology and data capture. And I would probably say this was the first one that we really got lots of traction from, with clients actually wanting to do something. And I think this comes because it addressed the OPEX and CAPEX, particularly into data insights. And I'll talk about a project that we've been working on with a large data center company here in Australia about how we use machine learning for optimizing their cooling plant. So they're the four key areas, and I just want to drive into some other areas that probably think about where to focus the dollars in particular at the moment, because for all these items around technology that you can integrate into a building in the future, the ones that really get people's attention are the ones that provide the most value. And I'm sure that a lot of you on this call already understand the 330-300 rule, and I think it's a really good rule to think about when you're working out what technology and what systems should be going into a building. And this is a research that was done by JLL quite a few years ago now, but most business and office use, particularly office, spend about $3, this is US dollars, $3 a square foot on utilities, 30 on the environment and space, and 300 per square foot on people. And you can see what I've added in there on the right-hand side here is from Australians. I've added in the neighbours rating and then the green star and then the Wells rating system. So what we're saying is you get your return on your investment, particularly on the people, because if you can keep your people happy, that's where the bang for buck is. So this is playing into what I was talking earlier around the third dimension of return on investment. So I think that's a really important part to think about. So taking all those facts away that I've given you today so far is what we started to talk about, is what does that mean and how do you describe that as to a client and to users of buildings about what to prioritise. So we've come up with a solution that we drive at the moment, which is what we call the 4 E's. So we look at economic, experiential, education, and environmental. And those are the 4 areas that we drive. And as you can see on the slide, how can we turn a building into a living, breathing example of good design? How do we increase a building's return on investment? And we do include the 3rd dimension of ROI on that, which is experiential. How do we increase productivity in a building? And environmental. How can a building benefit the community and the environment? So back to my comment earlier around some of the mistakes I made earlier in my career about thinking there's lots of technology in a building. I started to ponder around how much technology, when's technology too much or not enough. And I came across Murray's Law, and I think this is really useful when people start thinking about intelligent buildings or buildings of the future. We tend to overestimate the technology in the short term and underestimate the effect in the long run. And I think if any of you that are involved in the design and construction industry could probably relate that law and rule to the way BIM's used or has been used. I remember, say, 10 years ago, there was a total buzz about BIM and what it could do, and then there was a few years where people were saying it's just a drafting tool, and now I just think about, we're in about the 10th year of that cycle. We're starting to really see the power of where BIM is, not just in design, but in operations of buildings. Lots of conversations around and actions, not just conversations around the digital twin, but also how the technology we're using in buildings can start feeding into those BIM models. So I think it's really important to remember that law. I use it a lot to think about things, especially when I'm talking to clients and my peers in the industry. So I just wanted to go on to some examples of where technology is being used, and I'm sure all of you have either used similar things to this, but I just wanted to show where it's the now rather than the future. So we do a lot of work with precincts, and we're quite often asked to use apps for precinct planners, so you can enhance either the visitors or the users' experience when they come to those parts. This one I've got on here is from the Olympic Park. It's probably one of the first ones. That's why I'm showing it to you. I think it shows how the Olympic Park in London used that. That's quite a few years ago now. And then one of the areas that we found quite useful, particularly, is rewards and incentivization. This is one that we've used with a university around their new gym and their new recreation activity centre, where they wanted to reward people who did lots of exercise and used their facilities. So technology enhancing the user's experience again through reward. The navigation apps, quite normal nowadays for us to be using navigation apps, so I wouldn't say this is so much a building of the future. I'd say this is the building of the now. Now I'll quickly flick to the next one. Wayfinding systems, the way they're used in shopping centres. And if I talked about these 2 years ago, I don't think they were used very often, and now I find them being used more and more. So that's one thing I would definitely say that's changed in buildings of the future. Clients are more receptive now than they ever used to be. I did have a video here to show you, but I can't get the sound to work across through this system, so we'll just have to leave that for now. But what this was about was the Comfy app that allows users inside buildings to control their light fittings, control the temperature in the building, so all from their smartphone system. And so I think this one's a particularly good system. And what I like about this is it puts the control with the user rather than with the building. All right, here we go. Something that's starting to happen more and more for us is using data analytics to see if people are happy or sad. And this is tying in with an American standard that's starting to be released as a trial, which is called the happiness factor of buildings. So instead of just rating them from a green star or a wellness factor, there is starting to be a happiness factor that's in trial at the moment, and it's partly used by using facial recognition. So one example I wanted to show you that we'd actually been working on from a machine learning perspective. This is a client of ours in Australia, Next DC. We do a lot of their data center works, and this is B3 up in Brisbane, where we've done a HVAC optimization using machine learning with them, and we've managed to do a 15% energy on their savings on their existing systems. That's using technology to control the cooling system. I was just going to now go into some things that are probably becoming not the normal, but are starting to be used here. So our audio visual guys will know more about this than me, but the hologram concierge, digital signage, interactive and recreational areas. So these are all driving user experience and making a different experience for the users. Large advertising display systems. Some clients are really into these, and I would say we're having more demand from these in our Asian teams than we do in our Australian or New Zealand teams, the large digital signage. So I just wanted to get into a bit more technical, and so try and split up the two areas how I see it in an industry going forward. And I'm assuming you will all have seen this image that I'm about to show you, because it's a BICSI image and I think it's a really clever image. So BICSI have done this work and I think it's quite interesting. There's this part of the stack is around the basic building services, the distribution center controls, connectivity, building subsystems, operation and management processes, and the data analytics and intelligence. And I think that's what our industry and our clients take for granted. And that's what I call, that's probably the invisible. That's the invisible part of what we do as designers and installers of technology systems. The bit that our clients in our industry seem to be really interested in is the value generation part. So, because this is what drives the value for them. So this is around those 4 areas that I talked about at the start of the presentation. And if you think about all of these systems here about sustainability, mobility, health, economic, productivity and efficiency, they're the things that drive the value into the building. So I think BICSI did a really good job doing this, and it's something if you're not using, I suggest you start thinking about how these titles and how this bottom stack works together. And what I think we'll find over the years is the items that are listed here now will all change as buildings change and as users change. So I don't think you can limit that to one, so that's the list and it'll always stay that list as technology changes. And I think that's what clients are looking for. They're looking for people to talk and think about what this top stack changes on. They just expect this bottom stack to work, and they expect us to know about the bottom stack. So taking that a step further, some of the team in Aurecon have do a lot of stadium work, and they spend a lot of their time when they do stadiums not talking about the technology systems in the background. They spend a lot of their time being asked about what's the fan experience going to be like. And they probably spend more time talking about the fan experience in our sport venues design than they actually do about the technology that sits in the background. And so that area of the marketplace for Aurecon and for others probably brings out the true drivers of buildings of the future to us. Now, my next slide, I can't give you any sound, so I'll move past that one as well. But if you ever get an opportunity to look at this video, it's Little Caesars Arena in Detroit, where the Red Wings play. And it's an amazing use of visuals and sound integrated together. So if you ever want to be inspired of what you can achieve as a building technology engineer, I urge you to look at these types of things. I think they're pretty fantastic and it shows what can be done. So closing up, I've done a bit of a whistle-top overview of our research and some of the things that we're seeing in the industry is what do we want from our technology? And Another BICSI slide is flexible, agile, and malleable. That's what clients are looking for. Always hard to achieve all of that. I think if you apply the stack approach, I think that's achievable. That can be achieved. So just quickly going over, that was the 4 areas that are there from our research: people at the centre, bottom line benefits, easy life, complex technology, and designs that make sense today and tomorrow. So I've gone through a lot of detail in those, and so what we have on our webpage, if you ever want to have a look at it, is, and we've gone through those 4 areas plus one other in quite a lot of detail, like 15 to 20 page reports that covers those items. So there's an overview document here: the buildings of the future, science fiction or science fact, bottom line benefits, buildings of the future, people at the centre, all about user experience, and then easy life, complex technology. Sorry, where in that one we explore how technology is going to be used in the future. I think we even look at how Bitcoin can be used and smart contracts and all those types of things. And then the final paper that was probably released about 3 weeks ago is why haven't buildings become productized? Probably my favourite one that I did some research on. I thought it's really interesting. I'm really talking about industrialised construction, and I see how technology will affect industrialised construction so much, and how that will change the way we do things. Not only the way we design, but the way we construct, and even our business models will probably need to change for those. So I've probably ran through pretty quickly there. I'm open to questions or discussion, or over to you. Is it Paul or Travis?
Hi, Peter. So thank you very much for the presentation, mate. I actually have a bit of a question myself. Have you had any recent discussions and talks around how those buildings of the future will help incorporate different aspects of life as we go forward? For example, COVID-19 and other those things will evolve. Yeah,
great question, Travis. And yeah, I think I might have spent the last 4 weeks being asked that question. So there's a couple of areas that come up straight away, and we're working on a project that we got awarded on the day that we went into lockdown around buildings of the future. And one thing that's definitely coming up on that project, we are going to go as touchless as possible for all the control systems. And that's quite interesting exercise, even looking to find out how much touchless control systems you can find. That's down to simple things like doors as well, about how you move doors. But we're trying to make things as touchless as possible. But then the other big question that's coming out now is how are we going to use buildings in the future? So before, I talked today a lot about the war on talent and pulling people to your building and pulling people to your business and using your building as a way to make people want to come to your business. Now, part of the change is that where technology will play a part is because some businesses, not all businesses, are going to work an increased percentage remotely. It's how your technology is going to enable that to happen, but also how you're going to use your technology to maintain, to pull those people into your business. And that can be that you just simply have frictionless technology to allow people to work from home, but also how you use technology to keep people engaged. So the biggest change, I think, for us at the moment with this pandemic is going to be how much we have to use controls, which is why we're probably looking at that more and more. And then how we, I actually think some of our buildings and clients that we work with are going to downsize the amount of numbers of people that actually enter into their buildings. So, but I actually think there's going to be more. That's just what the conversations have got to at the moment. I think what you'll find is that as time goes by and people work from home, they realise how much more they want to work in an office. But what it might change is the location of that office. I have a theory that, and it is only a theory at the moment, maybe there's going to be a bit of more of a push to move away from the CBD, some organisations, so that their staff, when they are travelling, aren't travelling in confined spaces with lots of people around them. I've got to let that one play out. I need to think about that in a bit more detail. But
do you also think that that might have more of a knock-on effect for the home environment as well?
yeah, I think housing design, if you think through what I've just talked about, the way housing design is going to need to change to allow people to work at home, some of the spaces will be very different, because you're going to spend more time at home. You're probably going to want to create more of a workspace. Lots of people are working on kitchen tables and those types of things. I think those changes will need to be made, and also lots of people have, I can't talk for all areas, but some areas of people have been drawn into the CBD. I live in Melbourne. I've noticed in the last 5 years how people have been drawn into Melbourne, into small apartments. I think if you're working at home, you might not really want that small apartment as much, or you might want a slightly larger apartment. So yeah, I think there is a change to go there, and I think that whereas work and home merge, the way buildings are designed and the way we use technology will have to change.
Absolutely, I agree with that. We've also got another question here. What do you consider the most advanced buildings in New Zealand and Australia, and why?
Oh, so I can't comment on New Zealand because I don't know enough about all of the buildings in New Zealand. But one of my favourite buildings in Australia is 25 King Street in Brisbane. And why do I like that? Because it's really simple. It's timber. It was constructed off site. It was designed, manufactured off site, and bought to site and assembled on site. And it's timber building. It's very light on the planet and really good on energy. Technology is quite simple inside it, which I quite like because it's quite frictionless the way the technology is used. So that's one I really like, and that's because what excites me about that building is the adoption of industrialised construction, even though it's in its early days. And I think that's one of the reasons I really love timber buildings. Because if you look at timber buildings and see how they are assembled on site and manufactured in a factory, and the way the services are integrated into them, it almost becomes it's a convergence of manufacturing and construction, and that's what excites me about those types of projects. I think they're really good. There's a couple of projects, buildings, and I would say they're not so much the actual building itself, it's the developer. There's a developer that's done two buildings, one in Sydney and one in Melbourne, where they've taken the adoption of using the Comfy app. I couldn't show you today. And what I like is that they've used the Comfy app to enhance the user experience inside the office and to give control over to the user. So I like those two buildings because they've actually, the building owner's taken the reins away from facilities manager and given it to the user. So it's not so much the building. I suppose what I'm saying there is I admire the building owner for taking the user experience to the next degree. The first to do it in Australia. And I'm sorry, I'm happy to hear from anybody on the call that can give me some really good stories about a New Zealand building. I have not had the fortune of being toured around lots of buildings in New Zealand.
I believe we also have a question from Paul. He's got a good one here. Paul, did you want to unmute yourself there?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, certainly can.
Great. Peter, thank you very much for the great presentation, and I do appreciate that slide with the stack of technologies and applications that sit on it. I entirely concur with that. In fact, I've had that view for years, that the infrastructure below the visible application should be invisible anyway, but it's up to us as an industry to that's the one, yeah, thank you. It's up to us as an industry, as the ICT infrastructure industry, to make sure that everything runs smoothly so that our clients don't have to worry about it, the assumption that it all just works. But the question I had just on that second layer, the power and energy side of things, we're seeing, well, I'm personally seeing the emergence of digital power, digital electricity, whatever you want to call it. There's a strong push for it from various, call it suppliers. Are you seeing interest in that particular space? Is it a potential game changer, or is it a viable alternative to mains power, or is it just simply a flash in the pan from your perspective?
So did you say digital power?
Yeah.
So do you want to enhance what you mean about digital power, Paul, to make sure I understand what you're asking?
Sorry, my apologies for that. There are a number of organisations that are advocating DC, digitally, impregnated power. Volt's a good example. Cisco's digital ceiling concept.
Yes, right now I understand what you're saying. Sorry, yeah.
Cisco used the term intrinsically safe ceiling, the whole pitch from a safety perspective. I understand there's one building in Melbourne that currently is full digital power. So they bring in mains, convert it to a DC digital format, and then articulate it through the building. I know of several buildings in the US that do that, and they do it successfully. So I'm just curious if you're seeing a tremors of this happening in the market.
No, we aren't. We are seeing it being talked about and used in small cases. What I think we are seeing more of is we are seeing people saying they want to generate their own power, and they want to drive power around a smart grid, and they want to store power on site and start pushing it around their own building networks. So have their own microgrid, smart grid within their own property portfolio. I'm actually looking at a current building in Melbourne where they are so keen on this type of approach, where they want to integrate solar into the facades of it's an existing building, and then start having their own storage on site, because they want to show their users, because they've got a target market of millennials, and they want to show their users that the building is going towards zero carbon. Whereas the DC power grid that you're talking around through ceilings and things doesn't address those issues for them, because we discussed that with them, and that they're saying no, that's not what their important driver is. They'd say yes, maybe, but they don't see that as something that their future tenants are going to look for. And they also look at that as if the tenant wishes to do that in their commercial building, that's what they would choose to do, but they don't see that as their role, but they see their role as making their building attractable to the predominantly millennials because of their drive to zero carbon by integrating solar into the facade of the building. Does that answer your question? Or?
Absolutely, thank you for that, Peter. And you've got the connection to the client base, and these are the ones that drive the deployment of technologies. So we hear about it, but it's what's the uptake, or what are the alternatives that consumers / end users / clients actually ask for?
Yeah, and I think it is currently, it's what makes their building unique and different. And I think there's currently there are two big areas. There's obviously the COVID subject that's around and has been around for the last 10 weeks in this part of the world, and longer in other parts of the world. The big driver, the underlying driver at the moment, is how does technology help those building owners and building users reduce their impact on the environment? So lots of discussion around, if you look at the building subsystems in this stack, how you get that to be visible to the users and start gamifying those issues. And I don't think we sit in project meetings or design team meetings or interviews without anybody asking us that question. They might not use the word gamify, but they go, I want my tenants, or I want my team or my employees to be able to know how they're affecting the environment through their energy usage. So I think that's up to us as designers, installers, engineers to think about how you can gamify energy usage, which is, I'm coming back to your point, which is I think probably more important than if you've got a DC grid in the ceiling or not.
Thanks for that, Peter.
No worries.
Okay, so just checking in, is there any other questions out there that we can answer for anyone?
I'm not seeing anything on the chat line or the Q&A, Travis.
No, not a worry. All right, guys. Well, I do not believe we have any other further questions at this stage. But look, thank you once again very much to Fluke Networks for the use of their WebEx platform today, and Fluke as a sponsor and also R&M as a sponsor. It's very, very greatly appreciated, and thank you very much to BICSI for organising today's presentation. And Peter, thank you very much to yourself. It was very insightful, and there's many great things to take away from your presentation today. If there is nothing else from anybody there, I believe we might call it a day.
Okay, I don't see anything online, so let's close off now.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, and we'll make the recording available later today.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that, Wayne.
No problem.